Welcome to our tutorial on our Romatech Roman shade. This tutorial will take you right through the whole process, beginning with the skin all the way through to the finished product. Now, the Romatech Roman shade is a corded shade, so if your country's legislation demands that you have a corded shroud, please adapt that. We haven't done that in the video, but you'll know what to do. If you are looking for a complete child-safe, no-sew Roman system, please jump forward to our Roma-safe Roman shade assembly tutorial. Now, what I've done is I've already pre-cut my skin. We're going to assume here that you have your own cutting equipment for doing roller blinds. If you don't, we can certainly help you out there, get in contact with machinery or whatever it is that you need. But I've basically done this on a table, cut it up square. The width is 1040 by 1550 is what we're going to be running with. Now, that equates to approximately 41 inches by 61 inches. What I've done, I've placed two straight edges on the table, one running right down the side of the table along the edge, and I've measured out from there 104 millimeters. 1040 millimeters, I'm sorry. So 1040. Push that into place there, so that's right. .1040 between gaps. Now, we also have a line on the top here, running along the top of the blind, which says on our straight edge that it is the no-sew headrail line. Okay, so what we do, we set our skin inside that gap, the pre-cut skin, roll down. Now, that's sitting nicely in between our straight edges there. It's nicely locked in. Allow a little bit of move if you have to. Okay, now our straight edges that we're running here are a tape that we have designed for SPP, which looks like this. Hold it up the right way. This is the very top, as you can see, and then it runs through with numerals. So we've got A1, B1, C1. That's actually, now that is stuck down on top of our straight edge like this, our aluminium straight edge. We stick that down because it's double-sided tape on there. Now, what we've done is we've consulted our chart, which hopefully we can see this on here if it's clear. We're going to 155, which is here, and it tells us that D8 is the preferred size. So all we have to do is get our little straight edge and our pencil. Always best to do this in pencil, not pen, because pen can come off on your fingers and end up on the backing. So what we do is we look for D1. If your blind is wider than this, you use a longer straight edge and have somebody on the other side helping you, but this is pretty good. Okay, now you see we draw one line, then we go down to D2. And so on until we reach D8. Might fast forward this for you. And D8. That's it. Now, what we'll do up the top here, we'll draw a line at our no-sew headrail line, which is the very top. And we'll also draw a line at the top or the start of the blind. I'll show you what that means later. Now that's it. You've marked your skin. You're now ready to assemble. Welcome to the assembly stage of the Roman blind, and due to video magic, you may have noticed I've had a haircut, bit of a trim. It was getting in my eyes, couldn't see what I was doing. Okay, so we're up to the stage now we're about to apply the battens. Now, a very important thing to know is with the battens themselves, the aluminium battens, splines, we cut these 5 millimeters less than the width of the skin. So in this case, the skin is 1040, our battens are cut at 1035. Okay, now I think it works out to about 1/4 of an inch you take off. Okay, now first thing we do, we turn our fabric upside down, like so. And we pull face to face till we find our first line that we've drawn. You roll that back and you crease it on that line. And that's ready to receive the batten. Before we do the batten, I'd like to show you something. This is a little piece of fabric I cut. It's exactly the same fabric, no different. I want to show you the importance of using the patented applicator. We'll put our little clear spline in there. And we'll take a piece of our profile, and remember, this has come straight from the saw. This is one of the major benefits of the Romatech system. You can come straight from the saw, straight to the fabric, no issues with creating any tearing in the blind. Now, if we don't put the applicator on this, and you see that's a nice, pristine piece of fabric, there's no marks or anything on there, except for the crease line. Now, by sliding that batten on, just like that, you can see already the damage that's been done to that skin. Now that will penetrate light coming through there. That skin is ruined. There's nothing you can do. It's a throwaway. Next, what I'm going to do is do another line. So as you can see, nothing up my sleeve. Okay, that's done. Put this in there. Now we use our little applicator. And we repeat the same step with the applicator. See how easy that is to push on? Take that off. Without the applicator, with the applicator. You can see the difference really clearly. It makes a lot of difference. Okay, so now what we're going to do is start applying our battens. A good habit to get into, irrespective of the fabric that you're working on, just to make it easy for your operator, because of the length, is to have your silicone and put a little, just a little squirt in there, just to get it started. Put our applicator on. Snap off the plastics, just like we did with our head rail, base rail, sorry. Now, something I'd like you to have a look at there when we're talking about the difference. You can see here how we're a little bit narrower than the end. It's got to be like that because that allows for the end cap to go on and allows for a little bit of movement in the fabric. That's why we make it about 5 millimetres narrower. It also alleviates the guesswork. I mean, if you're trying to cut a skin at 1040 wide and you're going to your saw to cut your battens at exactly 1040 wide, if one of them is out by a couple of millimetres, your battens could stick past the fabric, or it just might not match up. Okay, now I'm going to make this easier. You repeat the same step. We'll just roll that back. Repeat the same step on the next line. All the way through the 8 lines. Now, I'm going to speed this up because it's the same all the way through right up to the 8 lines. So I'll join you when we're ready to apply the head rail. We're now up to our 8th batten, and I'd like to show something that I neglected to show you on the first batten that's quite important. When applying your batten to the fabric, pinch your fabric like this so you're actually holding onto the clear and the fabric itself. You slide your applicator on. Now, once you've found it, don't pull by the applicator. That's a no-no. Put your hand on the fabric and simply push the batten on. That is batten number 8. We're now ready for the next part, and that's applying the head rail. Welcome to the attachment of the head rail tutorial. We made a head rail a little bit earlier. So this is one that we prepared earlier. There's a few steps that you need to take on here. You'll remember that what we did was when we first started, we drew a couple of lines on the top. This is the head rail line and the top of the blind line, which is on our straight edges. What we need to do now, first of all, is to put double-sided tape just underneath the very top line. So that now looks like that. You may have noticed throughout the tutorials what we're doing is we're using predominantly 3M tape. Now this tape, we've been using this for 30 years and it has never let us down. We don't recommend using cheap tapes, nasty tapes. It's an expensive product that you're selling here. So you should be using good quality gear. Okay, now once your tape has been applied, you simply cut along the top edge, preferably with a sharp pair of scissors. This piece is now discarded. And I'll give you a look at how that looks there. As you can see, our tape is right to the very top of the blind. So now we peel our tape back. And we now apply our rigid 15mm spline. Now 15mm is very, very important for the headrail. It'll stop any of the fabric and the Roman from coming out from the headrail. You'll see how this locks in just a second. Push that down nice and firmly. Now it's a little bit hard to catch this next bit on video, but what I'll do, I'll do it and then I'll show you a close-up of how the fabric should look. Now I'm folding that back over on itself again, like so. Push that down nice and hard. Okay, then what I do, I've taken the end cap off my pre-made headrail, and I'm going to slide this on. Now, I've done a little one here just to give you an idea. You can actually see how the fabric is folded within there and how it fits in the channel. You've got your little piece of plastic which goes in, and your main fabric hangs over the top. And that's why it's 15mm inside there, because I could put my whole weight on that and it will not come out. If it's any narrower, there could be a chance that that spline could slip through that gap and your skin will fall off the headrail. So you don't want that. So 15mm, very important. Okay, and as a final step, we put our end cap on. Now, a lot is going to depend on how you run your assembly line. If you're a one-stop shop with one person, they'll do the whole assembly themselves. What we used to do in our fabrication was we'd get it to this point with the headrail attached, and we'd move it on to the next table, which is where the end caps and the twist rings would be done, onto the next table where the base rail will be done and the drop, and it's finished, like a production line. Good old Henry Ford. And it worked very, very well for us, but it depends on the size of your facility, how many people you want to use making the Romans, but obviously the more hands make light work. Okay, so that's the attachment of the headrail. Next video will show you how to do your twist rings and your end caps. Welcome back to the tutorial of placing on your end caps and twist rings. A little bit hard to focus in on this one area, so I'll just show you how it's done over here. The placement of the end cap is quite an easy process. As you'll see here, we call our H-batten profile, aluminium profile. With the end cap in your fingers, you just sit that over the top and simply push on. You'll hear that sort of sliding onto the base rail there. Now you can see that's firmly fitted. You just cannot remove that. It won't come off. It's designed that way. It's hard to push on, which means it's very, very hard to pull off. So once again, child safety in mind. Now we have our little twist ring here. Again, it sits in there like that, and turn it 90 degrees. So you see, turn, comes out, turn to lock in. Should be worth noting that these clips are made from 100% virgin polycarbonate. There's no regrind in there whatsoever, so they will not break down. In fact, we've been using this same recipe since 2004, and we have never had one come back. Now, speaking from an Australian, in our country where the UV is pretty bad, that's a bold statement. They will not break down. I'm now going to do the blind. You've seen how they're applied, so I'll just do the blind while you're watching. Now, what I do is I pull up every second batten. Every second batten is where our cords will be locked to. Sit that down nice and flat like that. Now, with a square and your pencil, you line this up directly with the hole. Now, you can see here where our cord is coming out of the hole. We line our straight edge up with that hole, and then we progress to draw lines on the batten so we know where our rings have to go. Hoping you can see that aligns up to where our rings have to be inserted. And you do that for each corded spool that you have along your head rail. Another good thing to remember with our twist rings is they're designed to fit firmly between the thumb and forefinger. Very, very easy to twist in. You won't get that old RSI or pains from doing it. Also, the little marks that I made on the batten here are in grey lead, so they can quite easily be wiped off in pencil. Don't use a pen or a marker for that, because you won't get them off. And you also run the risk of getting that marker or pen onto the backing, which you don't want either. Okay, so they're all in place now. What we do is we pull our cord out. Make sure that's nice and straight. And run that through each eyelet. Pull it all the way through. That, same on this side. You're bound to get knots in it. It happens every time. So if I have, I'll cut it and oh, magic, okay. All the way through. Perfect. Now we'll place on our end caps. Twist rings, end caps can be done in any order, basically, at any time that your facility, your manufacturing program suits. So there's no set in concrete step here. Now again, I'll probably speed this up for you because it'll be a bit slow and boring. Okay, so all of our end caps are on. Don't be afraid to tap them in a little bit. If there's a difficult or a hard part about the whole process of putting this blind together, it's applying the end caps. They need to be tight to go on to make sure they don't come off. Again, obviously very important for child safety. The final step to assembling our shade is to assembling with the cording is to put the little cord lock on the end of the cords. I'll show you how to do this. End of our cords, to level the blinds, we use a little orb. Get our cord. Push that through, as you can see. Then to lock that little orb so it won't slide off with the weight of the blind, tie a knot in the base. A double knot, and you can slide your orb onto the knot, as you can see, and the orb can't go past. It locks it on, that spring tension. I'll just thread the orb on now. I'm just going to pull that up to here. Same for the other side. Now we're almost done. We're now going to take it to the last stage, which will be checking the drop and marking the drop. Now I'm going to pull the blind back up again, like so. every second panel. Pull the cord nice and tight through there. Then with your orb, press the button and bring it up to the last batten. What that's going to do, that's going to assist you to move your blind or your shade to wherever you're going to do your drop, so you don't have the fabric hanging around all over the place. Okay, so that's it for doing your twist rings and end caps and your orbs for the bottom of the cords. Join us in the next part where we'll be laying it up, checking the drop and attaching the base rail. Welcome back to the final part of our tutorial on the Romatech Roman Shade Assembly. You remember in the last section I said that we did those orbs up so that you could carry your blind around and not drag it on the floor. Normally what we do in the next step is we'd hang this on a rack to measure the drop, but I'm going to make it a little bit easier. I'm going to actually do it on the table because it's a small blind. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring it up to the end. I'm going to clamp it level with the edge of the end of the table there. And we'll do our measurements from here. Probably a little bit easier to explain. Larger blinds, it's a lot better to do it on the rack. But in this instance, now, we'll undo our orbs again. Pull our strings down. Then what we'll do is bring our blind down. That's nice. Now you see there's a lot of spring in there. Okay, so this next step, what we've got to do, we've got to pull the blind down just till we get some resistance, so it flattens out. We'll fit our tape measure to the top of the blind, there. Pull down our skin to get some resistance, and then we'll mark our drop at 1550. Now we've done that, we'll undo the clamps, pull up our blind, and spin it around. Now generally what I do here is I get my ruler and I'll flatten that batten out and I'll push my ruler up against the end there and I'll measure it. Now that says 17 centimetres. I'll convert this to inches when I do the editing. And 17. It's always best to do your initial drop measurement in the middle of the blind because you're not going to have, if you end up having side seams at some stage, you're not going to get that resistance. So you really need to go from the centre. Okay, now that has marked the finished drop of our blind. Now you might remember in our tutorial for the base rails, I've mentioned that it was a little bit different from roller blind to Roman because on a roller blind it doesn't matter. Obviously, you've got extra fabric up in the roll. With the Roman, it's got to end at the exact right drop. So follow me with this. It's a little bit tricky, but we will get there. From the line that we've just drawn for a covered base rail, we're going to measure up from that line 50 mil. So we now have two lines. And just to make it even more confusing, from that line we measure down 89 millimetres. Okay, now we cut away the very bottom line. Believe me, there's a reason that we do so many lines. Now what we're going to do, we're going to fold this particular line here, the second line up. There we go. Okay, right on the line. There we go. Okay, now, like always, put our spline. And our base rail. And like with the profiles, what I like to do here, because it's a larger blind, it's going to need a little bit of silicone in there, so just spray a little touch. Makes it easier to push on. Okay. Now you see that 50mm line up? It's now, we can see from where I'm standing anyway, I can see the line where it said that's the bottom of the blind, so we're right on target for that. That's perfect. Okay, so the next thing that we do, we put our tape on to that bottom of that opening. There's a lot more detailed information on the process of this in the text in the tutorial for base rails. There we go. I'll pull this up. Push down. Yep, our base rail's looking pretty good. Then use our knife, poke it into the channel. That way. And then back in this way. Our final step is our silencio strip. Little arrowhead. Now same thing, this is like a wider blind, so let's put a little bit of silicone in and make it a bit easier. Yeah. Now, we're ready for levelling, but what we'll do, once again, we'll pull our little orbs up. To make it easy to move the blind. There we go. Okay, so we finally made it to putting our blind up on the rack, or a shade on the rack. Please excuse our arbitrary rack here. It's not very good, but it'll do the job that we need. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to check our drop. So we'll lower the blind down on the shade. Remember, we're looking for 1550. Now, by rights, because it's brand new, it should be a couple of centimetres short. And it is, and that will drop beautifully to 1550. Just needs to get that tension out, and that will drop pretty well within an hour, maybe less. Now we'll show the back of the shade, and you can see how everything works, how everything is laid out, and you'll see that we've got our little chord orbs down here, which are too low. So what you want to do is lift those up till they're about 2 fingers. 2 fingers like that underneath the eyelet. That's pretty good. Okay, then we'll just try, pull it up, see if it's level. That's looking pretty good. So what we do now is we do a knot at the bottom. And you push that up to the bottom of the little orb there. And we'll do it again. It's easier if you do it. Now that's a double knot that we put under there, so that orb cannot go any further. We'll do the same on this side. And just trim a little bit underneath. There we are. Now what we want to do now is we want to adjust our brake so that it doesn't go any further. Keep that up nice and tight. That's as far as that will go now. Now our bottom limit is set. Now we want that to be our top limit. And there we go. That's now our top limit is set. And our bottom limit also. To explain the brake in a little bit more detail, what I have done is I've set my drop on the rack and I brought the blind back onto the table. Now I don't advise doing that in a normal situation. You really need this to be hanging on the rack to adjust it properly. But what I've done is this block here is now set. This is what goes up and down the thread, and that's now sitting in the fully down position that I'm happy with. So what I'll do is these little barrels move, as you can see here. They slide backwards and forwards. So I'm going to move that right up against this block, and then I'm going to tighten it up with the little Allen key. Now that block can no longer move. What that means is that this block can no longer go any further, so that has set the drop. Once it hits this, it can't go any further. I've now set the blind to its highest limit. As you can see, this block has now moved from there down the spine, and that is where the finished drop is. So again, I'm going to slide this up. I'll turn my chain just slightly so I can get to that Allen key. There we are. And again, that'll be tightened up. Now the movement of this blind is now restricted between the end of this barrel and that barrel. It can move in between there. This is our upper limit, this is our lower limit. Well, this brings us to an end for our tutorial for our Romatech Roman blind system. I hope you found the tutorial informative. Remember, we are available via our website. For any questions, please feel free to email or call at any time. We're only here to help. I would like to also point out that perhaps you didn't notice during that whole tutorial piece there was no specialty equipment used. Everything that we used in the assembly of this blind can come from a kitchen drawer or a shed. You don't need to spend a lot of money as a startup to get into this program. Of course, you can spend money on creasing and cutting machinery should you wish, unless you don't already have that. The other thing worth noticing is if we combine all of those videos together, an experienced assembler could probably make this whole shade, which is 41 inches wide by 61 inches long, or 1040 by 1550, could be assembled in less than half an hour. Now, I don't know where you come from. Where I come from, that's a pretty quick Roman shade. I mean, not bad to get 16 shades out of one employee per day. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the other tutorials.